All right, everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to see if we can get this stinking oil pan on once and for all. So if you saw the previous videos, you saw that I was having clearance issues with the factory windage tray and the oil pickup tube. Okay, it was coming out and it was hitting the corner of the factory windage tray right through here. This is the Canton windage tray, which looks to alleviate that issue because this whole section is cut out of the windage tray. So in theory, we shouldn't have any problems there. This is the 20-902. It does say it's for a front sump, but it's, yeah, I don't think it matters. It's the same deal. I have a rear sump pan and this should work just fine. So far on the initial test fit here, I obviously am running into some clearance issues, and that is with the crank scraper that I have. So that is by no fault of the crank scraper or the windage tray, because they are not from the same company, and therefore you can't expect them to just fit together. So what I'm going to do is I've marked off on the crank scraper here all the edges of where the windage tray is, and I'm just going to go in and clearance the backside of the crank scraper here. So in between all these green marks, I'm just going to clearance that out a little bit so we have enough room to get this guy back on. Okay, and we won't have any interference where the windage tray comes down and meets the edge of the crank scraper. So I shouldn't need to clearance a lot, and then everything should fit up nice, and then hopefully I can get the pickup tube on there and we shouldn't have any issues there either. I'd test fit it now, but it doesn't really make much sense to, because I'd have to take off the crank scraper, and that's going to set things at a different height, and it won't give me a true indication of whether or not everything's going to fit. So I'm going to get that done, do some more test fitting. I'll show you where things sit after that, and then we can finally go to getting the new pickup in there, making sure that fits like it's supposed to. And then once that's okay, then we can put the pan on, and I can finally seal this stupid thing up and be done with the bottom end. So I will keep you apprised of the situation. See you soon. So here's the first stage of the clearancing. You can see we started here to here. Okay, so I didn't take much out of there because I don't want to. If I don't have to take it out, I don't want to take it out, you know. And then basically from here all the way across to here. So let's throw the windage tray on again and see where we ended up. I'm guessing it's not going to be enough, but we'll take it in baby steps and just nibble away at it. All right, so yeah, we're still, see, and this end seems to clear, but this end is a little tighter. Yep. So we're still hitting in there. You know, one thing I could do is clearance out the hole for the crank scraper, but if I do that, then that's going to throw off all the clearancing I did in here for the crankshaft itself. You know, if I start screwing around by enlarging these holes, that's going to allow the scraper to move around, and then all of my work I did to clearance out all these spots is going to be for nothing, because things may not line up anymore. You know, we could still have contact between the crank scraper and the shaft again. So I want to leave those where they are. I don't want to do anything with those because I know that fits right now. So we'll continue to chip away at this edge here until we get enough clearance for the windage tray. So I'll take another stab at that. We'll take off a little more material and test fit it again. Okay, So as expected, there were some bumps along the way, and I had to do a lot of clearancing on the crank scraper. Finally got that clearance enough to get the windage tray on, because these tabs of the windage tray were interfering with the back edge of the crank scraper. So I got those two to jive together and fit in there, and everything laid flat. The next issue was this damn pickup tube. I don't know if it was by design or, a lazy welder or what the deal was, but this tube, first of all, this corner, it was hitting on the inside tab of the windage tray, so I had to clearance that. I had to clearance the crank scraper there. So those just barely missed this inside corner of the pickup tube now. Then, right here where this, I don't know if it's a joint or what it is, but there's a collar welded around the tube here. So, after this collar, the tube was no longer straight. It had a very slight angle inwards towards the windage tray, and it was actually hitting the windage tray. So I had to put this thing in the vise and bend and, hit it with the dead blow and bend and kind of keep massaging it until it got to the point where it was just off of the windage tray here. So everything fits now. What a pain in the ass. This is, again, functionally, all this stuff from Canton will work just fine. The fit and finish is absolute garbage in my opinion. I will no longer buy any products from Canton because this has been just a headache from the start. It started with the oil pan. I've actually cleaned this up a fair amount, but you can see just the way these edges and corners were cut out. They're all ragged and they were jagged, and there was literally metal flashing just hanging off the edges here. I spent at least an hour with a fine file and some sandpaper cleaning everything up, because obviously you don't want to be sucking that stuff into your pickup and in your oil pump and through the engine. Just everything had jagged edges on it. I had to clean up every single piece except for the pickup tube, but of course that was bent, so that had to be adjusted. So it's been a disappointing ordeal from the start. And now I'm throwing stuff. So I'm just going to pull this off quick. So you guys can kind of see how much clearancing I did on everything. Another thing to note as well is that when you go to put this on, you can see here, I've made, I drew 3 little green arrows on the bottom of the windage tray. Those nuts have to be torqued down before you put on the pickup tube, because you can't get to them otherwise. So that's another reason why I did all of this test fitting beforehand, before trying to get this thing all done up. Also this bolt here, the windage tray kind of gets in the way of getting to this bolt here on the oil pickup. I can get to it, but you got to go in at an angle. That off. So I did not put in the O-ring because I was just test fitting still, but she is still, geez. Apparently there's still some interference there. Still a little interference there. So I don't know if you can see it here. It was way worse before, but there is still a very slight upward angle here. It was a lot worse before, so I had to kind of bend that out to get that to fit on properly. Pull the rest of these nuts off. Now, unlike the OEM windage tray, this one only uses 4 nuts to hold it on. Okay, so on here, right there, I had to clearance a bunch on this corner to get that so the pickup tube would not interfere there. I actually also took each of these edges and hit those with the flat wheel a little bit so I could kind of bend those, bend those away from the crank scraper a little bit. And I'll show you how much I had to clearance here. It was quite a bit, actually. I was really surprised at how far I had to go with this. It was getting to the point I was almost uncomfortable taking any more material off there. So now as you look at this, this is the original edge, and where it drops in here, that's all the material I had to basically grind away to clear the windage tray. So it was quite a bit of material, and that was, back and forth with the flat disc and, the fine file and sandpaper, just because I didn't want to take too much at once. But it finally fits and clears the windage tray like I needed it to. And now I can finally put this thing together and seal it up on the bottom end. So next step is going to be get this all together, O-ring on the pickup tube, so it's the final assembly, so to speak. And then I can do the gaskets on the front cover and the rear cover and the oil pan, and finally get all the gaskets and everything buttoned up. And then we can get on to the top end. So once I get this all done, I'll pick up with you guys again and we'll continue on. Thanks. Hey guys, I wanted to bring you back up to date here. So I was just in the process of installing the front and rear cover and the oil pan. And there's some things to pay attention to here if you're doing an LS. You can buy these alignment tools, and they're snug. Like for the front, for instance, you got this tool here, fits really tightly into the opening for the seal on the lower portion of the front cover, and it slides over the crank snout there. And what that does is it aligns everything so that you don't have any weird gaps, but it aligns your cover around the crankshaft snout, so when you put your seal in, everything's perfectly aligned there and you don't have a leak there at the crank. Same deal in the back here. So you can see this cover on the back. It just slides in there. Easier said than done, but it slides onto the back side over here. So that aligns your rear cover. This one I really fought with. I had to actually go around the back side of the crank here and take off some of this rust and scale that was around the back edge and clean that off with some light sandpapering and then a little bit of like a 3M scuff pad just to clean all that up. Otherwise I wasn't able to get this thing on. It's so tight. But in there like that, slide it on. Now you will see, if you go and look this up online, you will see some people that say you don't need it, and maybe you don't. I don't know. I had the tool, so I'm just going to use it. But on the rear, they say if you put the seal in the cover first and then put it on, it will self-align. Okay. And then on the front, they say that if you put your harmonic balancer in, put the seal in the front cover and then put your harmonic balancer in, then that will be aligned the way it's supposed to be. But the other thing with the alignment is, this is your oil pan rail, and these front and rear covers are supposed to be flush with that oil pan rail. Now, for me, my rear is about perfect. That's what she said. The front here, I've got a very, very small little lip right here. And that may or may not be, I don't know if that's the cover. Yeah, I can even it out side to side. But this is where, when you do your gasket, they always say to put a dab of sealant, like silicone, gasket maker, or whatever, in these four corners, because that's a big spot for these to leak. So, like your gaskets, these reusable gaskets, it's a metal core, steel core, and then you got the whatever that is, rubber, silicone, your sealing material, that'll go on here, but that's not going to necessarily fill in any differentiations you may have at those seams. So a dab of silicone there, and then put your gasket on, and that should seal everything up for you. And you shouldn't have any leaks that way. Let's see, what else? I am using a different rear cover. A different front cover. So mine, the one that was in the vehicle on the engine when I got it, I actually broke off the bolt in here, putting the new sensor in there. So I opted to just buy a new cover because it was like $45 for a takeoff cover, and it came with the wiring harness and the VVT magnet deal and all that stuff. It did have a seal in it, but the lip of the seal was pretty stiff. So I had a seal anyway with the gasket set that I bought. So I just opted to pull that out and clean it all up, and I'll use the new seal in there. So, but anyway, I'll keep plugging away at this and start getting things put back together here, and we'll be back in a bit. Thanks. Well, it's finally happened, folks. It's on. So the oil pan's on finally. Everything should still be lined up as per the alignment tools. Pro tip, put your gaskets on before you put your covers on. Thankfully I caught that before I got too far ahead of myself. So gasket, then cover, gasket, then oil pan. Like I said, I had put some little gobs of silicone underneath the oil pan gasket on the block and the seam of the block and the cover front and back. I also put a bit of silicone on the ends of the bolts here that go in the oil pan. Just a suggestion I had read online, so it's certainly not going to hurt anything. Is it essential? I don't know, but it's not going to hurt anything. So anything that will help prevent an oil leak, I'm all for that. So as far as the torquing, a couple things I read was basically start on your outside four corners, snug it down a bit, go to the middle, and then work your way outwards in kind of a crisscross pattern. And then do that like 3 times until you get to your final torque spec. I believe the factory torque spec is 18 foot-pounds for these. Same with the front cover. Yeah, so, and if you're wondering, I went with the Allen head bolts. Because I wanted stainless. I really hate rust. It's not a structural item, so the stainless bolts will be just fine. And the Allen heads are I just like the way they look, honestly. And for something like this underneath the car, you got less of a chance of something hitting the bolt head and, you know, getting rounded off or something like that. So, but that is really the gist of it now. That's all I've got. All the gaskets are in. And I'm just going to let this sit overnight. So the little bit of silicone that is in there is going to dry. And tomorrow we'll flip it over and we'll get going on the rest of it. So, headway. Awesome. I like it.